ComC is your home for buying, selling, and flipping all the hottest trading cards. Their consignment marketplace is home to over 27 million cards across all sports, genres, and eras. With a ComC account, you can purchase cards from different sellers over time and ship them home together later, or immediately reprice them for sale on the ComC marketplace. To stay updated with ComC, please follow them on social media at CheckOutMyCards, one word, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn about offers, promotions, and more at ComC, please visit blog.comc.com. You're listening to the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute, a podcast where we discuss both the hobby and business sides of collecting. I'm your host, Mike Sommer, and I want to help you buy, sell, and trade your way into a collection you'll love. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute. Last weekend, I got to do two of my favorite things, both on the same weekend. First of all, I got to go to two different card shows. I went to one on Friday afternoon, and then we had our own local small monthly show at the shop on Saturday. So two card shows on the same weekend, and I also got to mow for the first time this spring. Mowing is one of the other things that I really enjoy doing. I love doing yard work, gardening, getting out there, getting dirty a little bit. And I got to mow this weekend as well. So it has been a good weekend of cards and mowing for me. And so I've really enjoyed that. I also enjoyed earlier last week to have this conversation that I'm going to show today with Beau. Beau, the 1 million Cubs guy, as some people know him. He has made a transition from doing cards as a side hustle to doing cards full time. And so we talk a little bit about that transition. We talk about what that has meant for his personal collection and his pursuit of 1 million Cubs. And it was just a great conversation. I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk with Beau. And so I hope you'll enjoy that conversation here in a couple minutes after I tell you about Underdog Collectibles, the online shop run by collectors for collectors. It breaks new product every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday night. You can check them out at udogcollect.com to see what they're going to be breaking this week. You can also visit them at their brick and mortar store in Knoxville, Tennessee, where you can see their full selection of wax, singles, supplies, and all of those types of things. And another service they offer is group submitting to SGC. So if you break with them and find a card you want to have graded by SGC, you can work with them directly to have that submitted for you on your behalf. Check them out at udogcollect.com and tell them WaxPackHero sent you. Well, today I want to welcome back to the show for the third time. We've got Beau Thompson, Mr. 1 million Cubs himself. That's what we've talked about the first couple times he was on, but that's not going to be our main point today. Beau, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always good to talk to you.
Yeah, we finally have some baseball back. You know, the Cubs, for me anyway, are off to a better start than I expected they might be. So I've been pleasantly surprised so far.
It's been an awesome start. And Suzuki I saw him out in spring training and he really struggled in his first few at bats. Of course, he was just coming over. So it's been just absolutely awesome to see the early success that he's had and really all through the lineup. A lot of the players are hitting well and playing a little small ball, which I like that. A Cubs lineup that's not totally built for power and home runs. So hopefully this trend continues throughout the rest of the season.
You hit on spring break, and that was one of the first things I wanted to talk about, or spring training. I mean, because it was a break for you. Because since we last talked at the National last summer, you've had quite a pivot. When you came down to see me in the fall to pick up 30 to 40,000 Cubs cards. I don't remember exactly what the number was, but it was
like 43,000.
43,000 cards. You came down to the shop on Saturday and picked those up, and you gave me kind of a hint of what might be coming soon at that point. Kept it under wraps. But since we last talked on the show, you've made the transition into being a card dealer online full-time. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about as we talk about combining both the business and hobby sides of collecting here. You've made that transition to be more business at this point. So let's spend a few minutes talking about that, if that's okay.
Absolutely. It's something that here we are. I'm trying to think of a timeline. I'll say a year and a half ago, there was no way that I would have anticipated making this transition. Maybe even a year ago, it was something that may have started to eke into my brain, like, hey, I can do this. The pandemic really kind of helped push me to this level, both in terms of scaling up the business side of the hobby, but also really opening my eyes to handling business, being self-employed. And what I mean by that is, during COVID, I worked in transportation for a third-party logistics company, and when the pandemic hit, pretty early on, I started working from home, and about half of our office was working remotely, and it was something that I kind of dragged my feet on because I didn't think I would have the discipline to work from home, because I've got cards all around me when I'm downstairs in the basement. There's too many distractions, and I can be a touch ADD when I have too many distractions around me. So I was concerned with that portion of the work from home gig. We have a home office on the main level of our house, which was my wife's home office. She can kind of bounce around anywhere in the house. I needed to be, because I had a phone that had to be hardwired in, with our software. So I took over the home office. She eventually, we made a home office in the upstairs out of a spare bedroom for her, as the pandemic forged on. But I learned that I did in fact have the discipline to work from home. And then it was sort of a thought process of, but do I have the discipline to sell cards, and how can I differentiate the hobby aspect and the hobby side of cards, as opposed to, okay, this is now my business, and in this part is my business. So it was a learning process every step of the way, and it continues to be, you know, as now I am full-fledged into it.
No, you were ramping up over the course of that period of time too, right? And that was somewhat a proof of concept for you. I know we've talked a little bit before, and I've heard you talk that you got insight from some other important people in your life, your wife, some other mentors, and things like that about what that might look like. I'm wondering, as you got started, what kind of goals did you have set for yourself as you made that transition and stopped working for a third party and became going into cards full time? What kind of goals did you have for yourself as you made that transition?
I think initially the goal was to not necessarily make more money, but my main goal was, the company I worked for had an amazing benefits package. So health insurance, dental insurance, even eye insurance was part of the plan. Didn't pay a dime for any health care. So that was a big, I think that's what really, and I didn't like my job. So, but I think that safety net of those benefits really kept me in a place I didn't want to be. Working a job I didn't want to work. That's what really held me back from, moving on, whether or not it was, going into business for myself, but just not making a leap to do anything other than what I was doing, because I had put the time in. So I had that vacation, 5, 6 weeks of vacation built up, great benefits package. So that was number one, where I had to look at the numbers very closely, get quotes on, outside healthcare. How much is this going to cost me and my wife? Because my wife was also, she wasn't paying, we weren't paying a dime for anything. So that was the biggest hurdle, was looking at those numbers. How can this work? The salary was something that, I'm okay early on, not quite making the income salary wise that I was making at my job, but it was, can we get all the other, the health insurance, all of that was the most important thing, was, just the, family health. So once we got the quotes on that, it's like, hey, this is doable. And then start crunching the numbers based on projections, where I see the future of card sales, and what I'm doing. And then, how do I continue to grow my inventory, and then find efficient ways to list and sell and ship.
So you sell primarily on eBay from an online perspective, and then you do the shows. You do a couple different shows around Northern Illinois and Southern Wisconsin. What was the thought process or the decision point around where you were going to sell online? Did you consider selling on multiple platforms? Were you pretty confident that eBay was going to be the only place you were going to sell from day one? Talk to me a little bit about the thought process on your decisions around where to sell online and be exclusive to eBay at this point.
Much of that had already been decided, well before I made the decision to do it full time. In the past, I have done multiple platforms, and I've had varied success with each platform. I migrated solely to eBay, actually probably 5 years ago, as my main platform. And then what was holding me back on eBay was I had at the time there were 3 levels of stores, and I had the intermediate level. But to grow into that next level store, it's like $350 a month for the enterprise version, which it takes a lot of listing to get to that point at the time, 2 years ago, when they still had insertion fees. When the pandemic hit in April of 2020, eBay all of a sudden to your store owners said, you get 50,000 free listings per month. So I was always hovering around 1,000 to 1,200 listings per month, despite having, a huge amount of inventory that I could list on eBay. So, that really, kind of helped propel me to list and really focus and drill down on eBay. Again, I mentioned I had a little ADD. So I love the eBay platform because everything is controlled within their own, within their own CMS. So everything is so easy and tracked, and all of a lot of the things you can use within their software, many people take for granted. In my sales background, if you've worked with platforms like Salesforce, that software is super expensive. So, and eBay acts just like some of those expensive CRMs. So I like the ease of use of that. So that's kind of where my focus has been the last few years.
One of the more unique aspects that I think you have, and I've got an appreciation for this too, is your focus on the low end of the market. And I think that while there's often overlooked segment of our collecting community that still loves to collect at the low end of the market and build collections of base and insert cards that are only worth a few dollars each, not everybody necessarily appreciates that to begin with. But I think even more so, it's pretty rare from what I've seen so far that there are people doing cards full time that are almost exclusively dealing with cards at the low end of the market. Talk to me a little bit about that. Was that something that you considered, as well as, do I need to make a transition or a pivot from dealing with so many low end cards and start dealing with more mid and high end cards if I'm going to do this full time? Or were you so confident based on the experience you had doing it as a side hustle that you'd be able to make a go of it, still focused at the current market that you're dealing with now?
That's a great question, because that was always something that would go through my mind when the thought crossed my head, when the thought crossed my mind of, am I going to do this full time? Can I really rely on, these small dollar sales? But I was having so much success with these low dollar sales, and it's all in projections. And okay, if I'm turning over 1% of my inventory on 1,000 listings, I'm moving X amount. But if it's 5,000 listings, 10,000 listings, and it's all in the numbers. Now you also have to consider it takes some time to pull those cards, ship those cards, and all of a sudden it becomes something where you have to really do I have to hire somebody now to help me ship? But what I came to realize was I can make a go of it and make enough to make a good living selling low end cards. What I also discovered was, especially during the pandemic, a lot of collectors were coming back in and driving the market up on some of the 80s and 90s cards that had just sat in people's collections in boxes for years and years because they wouldn't move. And all of a sudden there's now a market for this. And that's actually sustained. And when I would go through these collections and go through these bulk and in my inventory, I would pull out a Brian Taylor rookie card. And Brian Taylor was, the Jason Dominguez, the Wander Franco of 1991, 92. And it's a card that's like, it brings back for me those fuzzy memories of being a kid and chasing the next hot prospect. And I put one on eBay and it sold. And I was a huge Jim McMahon fan as a Chicago Bears fan growing up. I'd throw some Jim McMahon cards and they would sell. And everything seemed to move. And it's still, I sold a 1990 Upper Deck Ben McDonald rookie card overnight. And so these sales are continuing. And these are cards that I can get essentially for free. These are cards that people have stuffed away in boxes and they're basically giving them away. I can go buy a bulk collection of 200,000 cards and pay $100. I'm paying a fraction of a penny and I'm getting all of this inventory that most people just want to throw away. So it's basically inventory at zero cost. And yes, I'm only making, my net profit on that Ben McDonald might only be 50 cents, but it came at no cost to me. So that's something that I feel like this is definitely sustainable on the low end. The only issue comes when the eBay store is scaling up and now I have too many items to ship that I'm finding that difficult to both list and ship at the same time, which I don't have that issue now, but as I continue to grow, it's going to be an issue that arises.
That's a good point that I want to make sure we touch on a little bit too, is, it would seem intuitively the easiest part as you're doing your analysis would be, hey, if I'm selling this much a month, doing it part-time, and I spend X amount more, I need inventory to be at this level to be able to sell X amount more, and that should bring me in X amount of revenue. It maybe isn't the first thing you think about of, okay, once I've got this much stuff listed and my store has this much in inventory, what kind of system do I need to have in place to find these cards when I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of cards listed to be able to pull it and pack it efficiently? So talk to me a little bit about that learning curve of, what were some of those learnings that went kind of just like you thought they would, or maybe some things that you're like, yeah, I didn't think this was going to be quite as big of a deal as I'm ramping up my inventory and selling more and more transactions every day?
Always evolving. And in fact, this, as we're talking, I'm going through trying to streamline and make the pulling process more easy by utilizing a new column, within eBay's listings which is custom label SKU, so I can locate these cards much faster. So initially when it started, when I was dabbling in eBay here and there, several years ago, I basically had a 1 row or 2 row box, probably an 800 count box when I first started. That was my eBay inventory. Well, it's really easy to go through a couple hundred cards. And then I opened a store and the store grew, now I have a baseball box. Well, I've got to streamline it down to the year. So I think it started with baseball being pretty sorted by set, by product, manufacturer, by product. And then baseball or football and basketball just kind of all over the place. And then I started to alphabetize, and now I'm looking at this alphabetized, and I'm seeing that, okay, it's good now with, say I have the last name that starts with A in football and I have 100 cards. It's okay now, but what happens when I have 1,000 cards? A is not good enough. So I broke it down, and it's, I think A is still on its own, but BA, BE, almost like a card catalog in the library. But there's time that goes into sorting these cards, because there's either sorting on the pre-sorting or post-sorting after listing. So there's always that time, to sort. And usually when I buy bulk, I'll get a 5 row box or a 4 row box, whether it's a dollar box or a quarter box. And then I put the inventory and I list it in eBay, and it's not sorted whatsoever. So that's when I started to utilize, and several people on social media were very helpful and led me to that custom label SKU. So now it's Now there's no sorting involved. So like today, I'll probably list 100 baseball cards, and it's going to go in its own label. And, custom label is going to be, 0419, and, dated or however it is. And then, under box one. So I know it's in box one, it's under 0419 as the SKU. And then there's only, 100 cards to flip through, and there's no sorting involved whatsoever. So it's just things that you learn on the go. And what's efficient today may not be efficient tomorrow. And I'm trying to uh, that's part of it is, yes, I want to be efficient today, but I want to be efficient a year from now. And also take into consideration that what if I do have somebody shipping? All of my baseball right now is listed by set, which confuses me when it comes to some of these sets, Bowman Chrome. And say you hire somebody for shipping that has no idea, they know how to ship, but they have no idea what cards are all about. How are they going to decipher between a Bowman Chrome and a Bowman and a first Bowman and all that? So uh, different things that, now as I scale up and, consider the future, that there may be somebody involved in this business that's not a card person. And, it's quicker to teach them how to locate a box and a SKU as opposed to give them a full education on what's the difference between Bowman and Tops and Fleer.
What would you say? I know it's going to vary a little bit each day, but what would you say is kind of that breakdown between time you spend listing and time you spend pulling and shipping?
It's definitely probably favors there's probably more time that goes into the shipping. And I think the main driver is because I've been disorganized. And I think that's what I finally came to the realization within the last week, that I've got to make some changes within my inventory management, because I'm spending way too much time either sorting or trying to find these cards. So I think, what I've been employing here over the last few days will really help me so I can get back to a better balance, and spend as much time listing cards as I'm spending shipping cards. So right now it's been lately favoring more on the shipping side than it has been on the listing side. So I need to get a better balance on that.
Now, you also do a live daily YouTube show that takes up kind of your early morning coffee hours. And so how does that content creation fit into your overall plan and your overall strategy? Is that something that you were doing that again before you went full time, is when that started, but you've continued it since you've been full time? Is that just because you enjoy doing it, or does that also play like an intentional role in building your business?
A little bit of both, actually. The reason I started that, and I started this show Hobby Evolution during the pandemic, because I was working from home, and most of my work, this was my previous employer, was done via email. And or if I was talking to coworkers, it was via Google Chat and not on the phone. I had very little phone conversation. So and we weren't going out during the pandemic. We weren't socializing. So that was my form of talking. And I have a radio background. So, I it's like, I need to talk. I bought a microphone, and it's like, I need to put this to use, and at least I can get some thoughts, you know, um, and speak and talk. And so that's how it started. And I labeled the show Hobby. I named it Hobby Evolution because my hobby the hobby has always evolved, and now it's evolved into a business. And I never would have thought episode 1 in June of 2020 that by episode 500 that it would be, business. I kept it Hobby Evolution just to keep that flow going. But the hobby for me evolved from childhood through adulthood, and then all the way into turning into a business in October of 2021. So I do it for just, and now I'm working, at home for myself. I don't have coworkers. So now it's a good way to, and I've built a loyal audience that chats with me. So it's almost like, it's almost like going to the cafe in the morning, or where I grew up in a small town in Illinois. You go to the gas station and there's 4 or 5 farmers drinking their coffee, and that was how they socialized. And for me in this day and age, the 21st century, it's getting online and talking on YouTube, I guess.
It seems like your audience is continuing to grow. It seems like, especially over the last few months, if I'm not mistaken, just from my own observations, it seems like those subscriber counts have really started to tick up over these last couple months. So it's fun to see, daily, consistently. It's not necessarily 7 days a week, but it's probably at least 5 to 6 days a week that you're putting out a show, and you've got a growing follower base. Have you had many people come to watch the show or listen to the show and that's the first exposure that they'd had to you, and then become customers of yours online?
Yes, and it happens quite frequently, which is really awesome. So it's definitely been something that's helped with both customers from eBay. They'll see my eBay name, and my eBay name is 1 million Cubs. So they see that and they're like, that's interesting. I'll put like a business card, with my website. They'll check that out. They'll find my YouTube channel, and all of a sudden they'll go from being an eBay customer to a viewer on my YouTube channel, and vice versa. People will see me on Twitter, click on the link, jump in. They'll hear me talk about the eBay store, just the tips on eBay, and become a customer that way. So it's a nice little synergy that it's been helpful on both sides of the spectrum.
You call it the hobby evolution, and you mentioned that the hobby has evolved for you over these last several years. Where does the hobby side, or your own personal collection, how has that been impacted by this move to doing cards full time?
Well, that part is not as fun anymore because I don't have the money to devote to my Cubs collection. I still, the 1 million Cubs project is still ongoing, and I'm approaching 800,000 Cubs cards now. Whereas in 2020 or 2021, when card shows started popping up, and I'm doing eBay as a side hustle, I have a lot more disposable income from my card sales, that I could go to card shows in the national and just buy whatever Cubs cards I wanted. And then as I started making that transition, you had to tighten the purse strings, and I don't get to have that much fun. And so now I'm really, and I've always been a bargain shopper, digging through bargain boxes, but now it's to an all new level where, if I say I want to spend $100 on cards at the show, I'm looking for what type of 25-cent dollar cards can I flip on eBay. I'm looking more as an inventory aspect. If I find, I did find one of my dealers that sets up regularly at my card show, has some great vintage. I picked up a Phil Cavaretta I can't remember what year, but an oddball vintage Phil Cavaretta card for like $8. So it was something that when I look to buy Cubs now, I'm looking for pre-war and vintage. So it satisfied that, but it also satisfied it was under $10. So, even though I have to watch every dollar I spend, I felt that, I did well enough as a seller at the show. And then with the inventory I bought, I felt okay spending $8 on a vintage Phil Cavaretta.
I think that's important to note, because when I first started even selling as a side hustle, one of the local dealers, that was one of the first things he told me was, hey, when you start trying to do cards for profit, you've got to be careful about getting high on your own supply. And you got to be careful about getting these collections and then keeping so many of the nice cards for yourself that you don't have enough to sell to be profitable anymore. And so while you might be having a nice collection, you're not going to make any money if you're keeping too many of these for yourself. That's one of the things I appreciate about still doing it as a side hustle, is I'm able to balance that and still be able to siphon off a few of those pickups for myself, but still keep enough out there for the shop inventory or my online inventory to be able to make a profit. But I also am not doing it as my primary source of income like you are. And so I'm glad that that's one of the things that you have picked up on too, or that whether that was advice you were given or whether you realize that for yourself. I think that can be one of the most challenging things for people who are making that move from being kind of a side deal into a full-time deal?
And I think it's important for collectors when they're doing that is some don't really have a narrowed collection where uh there's a lot of people within the hobby, and I've done this, before my Cubs project. I'd just pick up cards, random cards. I didn't really have uh, a vision of what type of a card collection I wanted to have. So I think that hurts a lot of people that want to do something, full time in cards, because they like every card and they just want to own every card, and that prevents them from selling. So having whether it's a niche collection or a definitely a narrowed focus really helped. In my case, really helped me. I collect Cubs, but then you also have to have the discipline to not overspend, like you mentioned.
As you think about, you've made this transition over the last 6 months or so, right? If there are other people who are out there thinking about doing something like this, what would be a couple pieces of advice or words of wisdom that you would have for them that maybe aren't the most obvious first things that come to mind? What are some things that you would want to make sure they spend some time thinking about before making this move?
I think number one is be prepared to work a ton of hours. You'll probably work twice as many hours as, a job you're doing full time now. And, early on, you probably won't, make that income back. It's, you're going to have to work on it. Um, and I would also add that take the things that are the least enjoyable about cards, and especially selling. And I'm talking about sorting and shipping. Shipping is like the bane of for me. I I dislike it, but I also like it's kind of almost where some people say sorting cards is therapy. To me, pulling cards and shipping is a therapy. Now, when I have 200 items to get shipped out a big sales weekend, then it gets tedious after a while. But to sit down, especially in the morning, have a cup of coffee, and I turn on, your podcast, other content creators, and I listen for a couple hours, and I'm shipping, and it's almost there. It probably is therapeutic. So if that's something, if there's any part of the sales process that you're doing that it's like, oh man, I couldn't do that, or being at home all day long. I mean, that some people can't handle just sitting at a computer desk, and whether it's a task like shipping cards or listing cards, sitting database entry. I mean, I use the eBay file exchange using a spreadsheet. I have a spreadsheet open, 3-4 hours a day. Some people can't handle that. So there's a lot of, little tedious things that are a part of selling cards full time, that it's not going out and buying collections and looking at nice cards and making a lot of money. With anything, no matter what you're doing, there's always going to be work involved. But I enjoyed. It's been 6 months in for me. I still love it. I'm having a good time. And so those would be some of the things. And I would definitely also advise, do it as a side hustle, and like really commit yourself to treating it as a business and not a side hustle. I mean, look at every penny you're spending, on envelopes, on postage, on the cards themselves, on the inventory, and do it as a side hustle, but treat it as a business, and project out. And, I actually did that in 2016 or 2017, where my focus was ripping and flipping boxes and cases, and my margins were just razor thin. I couldn't believe it until I started tracking those things. How much am I spending on supplies? How much time am I spending? How much money am I putting into these cases? And then how much am I making? And it was a tough lesson, but it was a lesson I learned doing it doing it on the side and realizing, okay, if I do want to sell cards full time, this ain't the way. And so you have to pivot. And this time around, I actually didn't, in 2016, 2017, it was something that I wanted, I actively pursued for a few months. Can I make this work? And I couldn't. So when, just continued doing my job. This time around, it was my side hustle, and I scaled up and realized that, okay, I found the path that can work for me. And sometimes it's a little trial and error, but definitely practice before taking any giant steps.
How has that transition been for your wife? Were there things that she's now brought up that, she wasn't necessarily thinking about as you guys were talking about it, last summer or last fall? I was just kind of curious, has that impacted her perception of this whole thing, over these last few months?
I think from the, can I make it work? I think probably 2 years ago, she was probably saying the same things I was saying. Like, there's no way you can do this. But then as she started seeing, some of the results during 2020 and 2021, the sales and the numbers, then, and there were a few occasions where she's like, maybe you should do this full time. She knew that I was in a position that I wasn't enjoying, and it did have an effect on my day-to-day life. I'd come home and just, after 8-9 hours of dealing with crap at the office, and then, come home, you're, kind of in a down mood. So she's been super helpful on the business side because she's in real estate. She's self-employed. So she's set up things, on the business side with, here's how you should track things, which I would have been, drowning without her help, because it's just, something I've never done, but she has a lot of experience. And so, she's been great to lean on, and in helping me with, a lot of the business stuff that I really don't like, the paperwork and the tracking and the accounting and all that stuff. So, she's been really helpful in that regard.
Well, hey, I really appreciate you spending a few minutes today. I think these are some great things for people to be thinking about. It's great to hear about how that transition has gone for you. Before we go, I want to make sure you get a chance. You've mentioned them a couple times throughout the conversation today, but if people want to see what you've got for sale, if people want to follow along with what you're doing and what you're cranking out from a content perspective, where can people find you online?
My hub is 1millioncubs.com. Unfortunately, I haven't been blogging lately, but the website 1millioncubs.com will take you in all the directions of my content, whether it be my YouTube channel, my Facebook page, my Twitter account, and my eBay store link can all be found 1millioncubs.com. So if you just go to that link, you can find the different links to my other social media platforms.
Very cool. Well, thanks again. It's always good to get the Midwest Bureau back together for another episode.
Like the athletes we admire, the Sports Card Shop is changing the game. We're not launching threes, bombing drives, or hitting dingers, but we have built a unique gathering spot for all collectors to trade cards, talk sports, play games, and watch their favorite athletes on the big screens. Yes, we've partnered with Panini, Upper Deck, Leaf, Topps, Fanatics, Pokemon, and others to bring you all the latest in sealed wax and singles. But the Sports Card Shop in New Buffalo, Michigan is much, much more. Our recent expansion brings collectible sneakers, Hot Wheels, and more sports and entertainment memorabilia into the mix. Our new Collector's Cave game room is the perfect place to throw a rip party, bring friends, rip packs, trade cards, play billiards, ping pong, shuffleboard, classic arcade, and Xbox games, all while watching your favorite sport on TV. Visit us at thesportscardshop.com. Follow us on social @_sportscardshop, or better yet, visit us in person to learn about special events, party packages, new products, and everything we're doing for you. The Sports Card Shop, connecting people, sports, and the hobby around the world.
Thanks again to Beau for coming on and spending a few minutes talking about his transition into doing cards full time. He also had a great conversation, or a couple conversations actually, with Ty on the Breaker Culture Network. And I would recommend you go find that as well if you want to hear more about his journey and even some of the more tactics that he uses to sell on eBay. It was a great conversation that they had. Well, I want to know what you think about this conversation and what questions did it bring to your mind. Reach out to me on Twitter at @TheMikeSummers, send me an email at waxpackhero@gmail.com, and reach out on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok at WaxPackHero as well. I want to know what you thought about the show and what questions you've got as you think through that process of selling cards full time. I'd also appreciate it if you left a rating and review on your podcast app of choice. It helps other people find the show and gives me some valuable feedback so I can keep improving this show. Thanks again for tuning in. That's all I've got for you today, and I'll catch you next time.